Jack, my other brother, Chief Chris Roberts. You know, we've come in at a time when other people spent a lot of time blazing some trails that gave us the ability to come in and just be the next generation. And sometimes I admit I take that for granted, seeing my brother, Chief Ian Campbell, here today, followed people like Chief Gibby Jacobs, Chief Bill Williams. And so it's just a tremendous honor to be able to have the keynote speaker that we have this evening, because David Walkem has been around doing stuff before any of us even talked about Aboriginal rights and title. As a member, former chief of the Cooks-Ferry Indian Band. I just came to learn tonight that he was the first Indigenous RPF in British Columbia. Round of applause for that. Like I said, there's people who have blazed some trails that made it a lot easier for us to take these things and bring a lot more clarity to them, and we wouldn't be here without some of these things. But it's really an honor to have, I'm just going to call you Chief anyway still, but to have David Walkem here with us. He's now with the BC Invasive Species Council, which is one of those things as resource developers we all have to pay attention to. It's one of those things that matter at the end of the day, and I'm really glad that there's still people with traditional ecological knowledge and First Nations grounding that are bringing some traditional knowledge to these BC councils that are dealing with some of these huge issues. And I was just teasing him about, is it just Scotch broom? And then we were talking about feral pigs and all the other different issues that need to be dealt with. But not only that, I understood that his family was one of the first to start building a gas station on their reserve back in the 1960s. And so these are just things that we take for granted. We all drive around and we see gas stations in place. Somebody had to do that first. Somebody had to do all these things that have put us in a position to take this discussion to the next round first. And so it's our great pleasure on behalf of the BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference to introduce David Walkem and have him share some of his thoughts with us. Thank you, David.
IROC2025. Good evening. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you to Elder Lollygood for that very unique, well, the blessing wasn't unique, but the participation was fantastic. Cook's Jam. I think I was originally asked to speak about some invasive species issues, and then I'm guessing they saw the light and they needed a fantastic speaker, and they called me first. Somehow I don't know if it worked that way, but I guess I'm now at that stage where they're saying that somebody older was doing all the trailblazing. That's a scary thought. I don't consider myself an elder, but I guess I'm getting there. As my elders were conscious of doing all the time, is that they always were learning. Every day is another learning. So what I put together here is just some thoughts. I've worked in the band. I've worked in forestry. I've worked lately in mining, and then I am a recovering politician. So I'm doing work with invasive species because it's fun, and I also work with the Chief Intlakapam Assembly as an advisor in my spare time. So I'll go through a little personal background, little thing on my education, political experience, forestry, mining, and lastly, invasive species, and see if I can offer any lessons. So I was born in Lytton and raised in Spencer's Bridge, and as my family's been in band leadership since my grandfather was quite young in early 1900s, He was chief, then my uncle was chief, then my father was chief, and then I was chief, and then my niece is chief right now, Christine Walkem. And my family has been involved in the ranching industry, logging, and tourism. As Dallas has already mentioned, my parents in 1960, when they opened up the Trans-Canada Highway through Fraser Canyon, my father was desperately looking for something to do to raise his young family, and jobs weren't all that great. The forest industry wasn't hiring Indians. They were starting to consolidate the licenses into bigger tenures, and so he had been a logger. So between him and his family, they decided that they were going to set up a gas station, a Sportsman Motel, dining room, and a Shell gas station or a motel in Spence's Bridge, which happened to be a tank of gas from Vancouver in 1960. And so at one point there was 7 gas stations in Spence's Bridge. And he found also time between politics and everything else is getting me out on the land to understand and appreciate that. I went to public school in Spence's Bridge in Lytton up until grade 11. And then our school burnt down and I had to go to North Cam High School. And when I got there, I was over a year behind everybody else. So I had to take my grade 11 sciences in the first semester and all my grade 12 sciences in the last semester, and somehow magically I made it into UBC, where I earned a Bachelor's of Science in Forestry. And at that point, Indian Affairs was only essentially pushing for First Nations to be lawyers and teachers, and so there wasn't any other Indigenous people in the whole faculty. I didn't get to meet the other First Nations students in UBC. It's not like today where there's really a great community of support, so that was interesting. And once I got out, I realized that in order to progress, I had to get a higher education. So I ended up applying for and got into University of Western Ontario into their MBA program and graduated in 1984. And as Dallas said, in 1985, I did my tests and became the first registered professional forester in BC. Now, since I don't have to pay the exorbitant fees, I put RET after my name. In 1990, I was elected as chief of my community, which I served until 2018. I stepped back from chief role and got elected as council, as my late wife, Nita Walkem, was battling cancer, and she lost in 2019. And now I'm recovering since 2022. During that time, we did a lot of firsts. First thing we did is changed our election code. The Indian Act is a powerfully depressive, submissive piece of legislation, and it wouldn't allow anybody that didn't live on reserve to vote. I could run as chief, but I couldn't vote. And 80% of our people lived off reserve because we had no housing and no jobs. So the first thing we did is we passed an election code that enabled all of our people to vote no matter where they were, and they could run for council. We only had to have one councillor on reserve. And that was liberating, because prior to that, every 2 years, there was a fight over who was ordinarily resident on reserve, that silly game. We also have done a membership code to try to take back control of our membership, to say who we are. And we also included the financial administrative law to give our community members some faith in what we were doing from a financial standpoint. During this time of firsts, we also co-founded with 5 other communities the Intlik Child and Family Services in 1997, and took back it was a delegated authority from the province, but we took back control of our kids in care. And we were penalized because those child and family services at the time were only paid by the amount of kids you had in care. So we didn't care. We brought them all back and we started looking at. So we reduced the amount of kids in care by over half within 3 years. And we supported our families at our own costs. Part of the other first we did is we did real property taxation on the railroads going through our reserves. We have both national railroads going through our reserves, and they paid property taxes to the province, and we got nothing. So we had to go through court all the way to leave to appeal to the Supreme Court before the Canadian Pacific Railroad essentially backed down and agreed to not fight us in court over ownership of the right-of-way, and the province relinquished their right to collect those property taxes, not before they gave the railroads a 50% tax break that we had to absorb too. And during all of this time, the BC treaty process was beginning, and we took a hard look at it and figured there was no end to it. They didn't have the makings in their strategy for the provincial and federal governments, and it would just turn into what it turned into, a very long, expensive process. So forestry. Prior to 1997, First Nations in BC could not get access to tenure. The only thing they would allow us is woodlots and maybe a timber sale if you were lucky. So we fought for years up till 1997. I think around about that time the province brought in their 5% take back of tenure from the majors, and they created a whole new instrument called a non-replaceable forest license. You get all the responsibilities of a replaceable forest license without any of the term that would allow you to finance anything. And they handed it out on a per capita basis, so it really wasn't a big economic generator. But it got us in the game, and the very first ones they handed out, it was required that we have a local mill hold our hands. During that time, we created 2 forest companies, Paya Forest Products with Lytton Lumber and Siska Band, and Kwait Forest Products with Aspen Planers and 4 other bands to take advantage of some tenures that were made available. Also, I sat for 6 years on the board of the Sustainable Forest Initiative Forest Certification Board until I timed out in 2016. So Stweek Resources was our bigger effort. It was still at the same time. I was president since we started it, and I'm back as president still. It's 8 First Nations in a joint venture. Right now we co-manage our own now they're replaceable, but small forest license. But it was set up by the provincial government as a pilot project for the innovative forest practices. They had 6 of them in the province, and we were one, but the government did an interesting thing in the Merit TSA. They said, if you can prove that there's extra allowable cut out there, then we'll give it to you but you have to have First Nations and industry all agree on the outcome. So it took us a while to bat our heads, and with the help of a district manager, Rod Du Bois, who was fantastic in terms of getting people together, we ended up hammering out a deal where we got 50% of any allowable cut that we proved to the same standards as the chief forester, and we got 50% of any new opportunities that the licensees, there were 6 licensees at the time. Up till that point, we had 0 people working as contractors for any of the licensees. We had a handful of people working in 3 sawmills in Merritt, and they wouldn't give us work. They said, well, it's too risky. We can't afford to our business, put the hands of our business in your hands, which was frustrating. In the end, we proved to the government that there was an uplift of an annual allowable cut replaceable at over 300,000 cubic meters. This was just before the mountain pine beetle came along. And our agreement was we got 50% of it. And then when they uplifted the mountain pine beetle in our area another 1 million cubic meters, we got 50% of that. And what we did is, in order to log that, we brought back we had the 8 bands, we brought back people that have worked all their lives in the logging industry as fallers, skidder operators, other operators, and brought them back and helped train them to take on contracts. And they went out and got their own financing because we gave them the opportunity. We said, we're not going to finance you, we'll help train you up, but you have to figure out how it's going to make it work, and we'll give you a little leeway on quality and timing, but you got to get up to speed really fast. And what we did is we brought in an expert market logging company to train our people up over a 3-year period, and then after that we took over management. So what worked here? It was a tough sled, but we had a mutually acceptable agreement between ourselves, industry, and the government. And we mutually understood what our goals were. I could go to a meeting with the Minister of Forests, and I wouldn't have to say a word about what our communities needed. The licensees would tell them, which was really fantastic. But what didn't work? Well, the government reneged on the promise of a replaceable volume. There was some discussions within the ministry about the philosophy of handing over free volume to industry and First Nations, so they made it for 5 years, and that was it. And we had an agreement for co-management of the resource. This is back in 2004. But the funding dried up, and once the incentives disappeared, then the other forest companies just went back to their old ways, didn't practice any of the innovative practices that we'd all agreed were good for the land and good for sustainability, and only we did that. So for mining, I was not involved in mining, although mining has been in my family. On both my mother's family, who's from England, they were miners, and my grandfather on that side was a prospector, and got my father and a whole bunch of other relatives involved in prospecting. Highland Valley Mine started up in our backyard near our reserves in Highland Valley and around in the late 50s. But we weren't involved. The only time we were involved was when in 2004 the mine was going to close, and some people from the mine showed up with 4 big thick binders saying, here's our closure plan, what do you think? We've already done it, tell us what you think. And then proceeded not to talk to us, really. It wasn't until 2009 from 2004 to 2009, the price of copper went crazy up. And they were making so much money they didn't know what to do with it. So the province then came up with the policy of requiring benefit agreements for any new mines or any mines that were shut down and reinvigorated, but nothing for an existing operating mine. So we had to spend quite a while working with the government to explain that that doesn't work, and get it back so that we would have been on the same footing as any of the other communities. I think the New Afton New Gold Mine was one of the first with an agreement, but we had to negotiate with the Minister of Mines what kind of policies there should be for us in terms of revenue sharing. They were offering us about 17% or 12% less than what they were offering for a mine that was just starting up for some reason. Never did figure that one out. But whatever the case, in 2013 we were able to negotiate a participation agreement with Teck Resources on Highland Valley. We had 8 mines, or 8 of the 15 Tla'amin communities, and we negotiated an ECTA agreement with the province at the same time for sharing their mineral taxes. And this was the first agreement with an operating mine in the province. And if you know Highland Valley, the Highland Valley mine's one of the biggest in BC. In 2013, we established Cheat and Tla'amin Assembly, and you heard from Natalie and Kama today about some of the joint work we're doing with them. We set up Kentem Limited Partnership, which was or is an economic development partnership of the 8 bands to take advantage of any contracting opportunities. And we set up the Intla'amin Legacy Trust. We knew this mine was supposed to be closing by 2028, I think it is. And we wanted to make sure that we had a legacy for our youth and our people after the mine closed down, in case it closed down. So we set up this Legacy Trust where we had 3 trustees that are picked and overseen by the 8 communities that have CNA and an administrative trustee. That really has worked well. My other experience is I've been sitting on the community of interest panel for the Mining Association of Canada since 2016, and that oversees their protocols for sustainable mining, the Towards Sustainable Mining protocols. And as of last year, I also sit on the Copper Mark Advisory Council, which is a relatively new one that is working with the Mining Association. They're co-creating this Consolidated Mining Standard Initiative globally to try to consolidate 4 major mining protocols into one standard that they hope to be in a position by, say, sometime this next year at this time to have it adopted. Through all of this, it's been a challenge in just incorporating Indigenous values into these mining standards, which we're very antiquated once when we got to them. And to the mining industry's credit, they have been willing to adopt all these new standards around Indigenous consultation and participation, as well as we added in new ones on climate change and water to identify a couple. So for the agreements with Highland Valley, as I alluded to, we only had 8 of the 15 Tla'amin communities. We tried our darndest to get the other 7 to join us. It didn't work. The mine has the fun task, and the government has the fun task of trying to deal with 4 agreements. They've got 3 other agreements, 2 single bands, and I think 5 other bands, on how to implement this, and that's been a challenge. But a thing that worked is one of the first things we did as the group of us that were working together, is that we sat down and worked out what our revenue or what our benefit sharing formula was going to be. How were we going to share out whatever comes out of this agreement? And we had really no idea what it was going to be. And so we ended up devising up a formula, if you will, that said what measures the impact of the mine. And we said, well, that's how close is your closest reserve to that mine, and how big is your population. And then we gave weights to how much. I think we gave 75% to how close you were to the mine, 25% to your population. And we took 50% of whatever we were going to get from the province and from the mine, and we said that goes to the communities on that, based on that sharing formula. The other 50% goes into our legacy trust for nation-level projects and for the future. That was really successful in terms of, from our standpoint. We developed really good relations with Teck and the province. I don't know if Peter Robb is in here. He was, I think you were with Murr at the time, and he was instrumental in not killing me, I guess, at some point, and getting this through government. I mean, it was an honor working with you on this, because that was some tough sledding there. But that's what kind of these things take, is you need some champions in each of these, whether it's First Nations, industry, or the government. And we developed in some capacity building, because we were going from 0 to 100 overnight. So what didn't work? We couldn't get the remainder of the Tla'amin bands to join us, and they end up having separate agreements, and we're talking with 2 of them, but the bigger group it's a battle all the time, so that doesn't help. When the mine went to implement the agreement, they weren't telling their internal managers about the agreement, so nobody was implementing our contracting clause. Or they were doing some pretty arbitrary decisions around how contracting benefits were being distributed. With the government has been inconsistent on how it deals with these issues. Instead of, say, what Rod Du Bois did in forestry, or what Peter Robb was doing, is trying to solve the problem. To me, they were taking the problem and just exacerbating it by oil in the squeaky wheel. And that's my opinion, and I could be wrong on it, but that's got complications even today. So with Invasive Species Council, as my experience on that is, I was concerned with what I was seeing happening. So I wanted to do something, and I happened to have some connections. I was invited to sit on the board of directors for the Canadian Council of Invasive Species, which I still sit on. And 2023, I was hired as part-time as a senior manager of strategic partnerships for Invasive Species Council of BC. And why? Invasive species impact ecosystems, culture, economy, all across all resources, and quite frankly, there isn't enough being done to address them. And collaboration is absolutely essential in dealing with invasive species. You've got to have government, First Nations, industry, and the public in general to be able to do what's necessary to protect our Tamuk, our lands. And just a little background on invasive species. It's the largest provincial invasive species council in Canada by far. It's a registered charity, and the focus is on education, outreach, training, cross-border collaboration right across Canada. And they before my time, they actually founded the Canadian Council on Invasive Species. So Invasive Species of BC has done a lot of joint efforts with government and industry and local First Nations. Some of the examples are there. There's lots of best management practices for parks, forestry, Ministry of Transport's gravel pits. We've done training in invasive species management planning with industry. With First Nations, we have an Indigenous invasive species network, and with local communities in terms of trying to get awareness and participation. With the public, it's awareness. A lot of people don't realize that baby's breath is invasive and it can destroy the ecosystem. After the Lytton fire, it burned up one of the graveyards. And then what came back after that is this explosion of baby's breath because people take flower arrangements to their loved ones. And you see that on roadside memorials to people that have died. People come back and give flower arrangements, and there's an explosion of baby's breath all around it. Just as one example. We're also doing a lot of work with guardians now. There's a lot of First Nations guardians programs, and they are frontline workers, and they're, I guess, really helpful in helping government agencies keep in terms of monitoring what's out there. The public, there's 10 regional invasive species organizations, independent societies that look after regional areas. And there's a lot of citizens. Whoop, my time is up. Okay, thanks. No. I got a couple more slides. Here's some examples of some of the best management practices or publications we have. All are available on our website. Sorry, I don't know how to shut this off. So some of the lessons we've learned for government. What I've seen is that government is really effective when it sets the stage, either through legislation or policy, such as what's happening with DRIPA. I mean, we dodged a big bullet last fall, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the future of DRIPA. But that's where they can shine, and where they can provide stable long-term frameworks, or like in the case of the innovative forest practices, they set the stage and then said, we're not going to tell you how. You can come to us and lobby us, but we're not going to make a unilateral decisions. You guys figure it out. And we did. There was a lot of arm twisting, swearing, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but we ended up doing it because there was something at the end for all of us. And they can enable co-management, which is a big hot topic within First Nations communities. But they have to be transparent, and that's not always the case. And where it's been successful is where there are individuals, Peter, such as Peter, Rob, that really take this on and make it happen. With industry, industry has to provide real economic opportunities, not token ones. Like when we first started talking around forestry, they were offering us 10 to 15,000 cubic meters as a contract per year, and after 5 years, if we were good enough, maybe we could get more. When we started up Stweek, by the time we had everything going, we were doing 20,000 cubic meters per month with our own contractors. And all of our contractors in Merritt became the contracts. So they ended up setting up 6 different contracting outfits, and they became preferred contractors for all industry because they were so good. All they needed was an opportunity. And this is kind of a big one. You have to really respect Indigenous rights and practice meaningful reconciliation. And I've spoken with Chief Willie Littlechild, who was on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and his biggest regret, I guess, is that their number, I think it was 93 or whatever it was, the corporate call to action wasn't being implemented well enough in his mind, and the last stuff he was working on was to try to get more industry to take that heed. And it's been very difficult. At the Mining Association, I've got them to, like, if you've ever been in a mining meeting, they all start with a safety share, because safety is important to everybody. So we're now doing reconciliation shares. So it's not just our First Nations members, it's everybody has the opportunity to step forward and share what they have seen working in their company or others around reconciliation. With First Nations, this probably is the more difficult one. A lot of us have to be realistic. And that might be asking a lot of councils that don't have the experience that others around here have talked about getting and understanding the economics of whatever industry you're in. But you can't expect to be a Macmillan Blodell with a 5,000 cubic meter a year allowable cut on your license. And we've got to understand the globalness of everything that we're doing, as we're desperately seeing that now with the United States tariffs and all of that, and the fact that we are part of a global industry, whether we understand it or not. And we have to ground our decisions, as we've heard countless stories about, in our Tumuk principles. Tumuk, in my language, can mean the land, but it can mean the universe. It's everything within our environment, living and unliving, that we relate to. We are a part of. We're a part of that. So we ground whatever we're doing in the health of the commute. And we use our rights and cultural teachings as a foundation for that. And we have to work out intertribal issues internally. Without that, I've been in situations where the government and industry is actually begging us, please come to us with what you want to see done. And we have 4, 3, 8 different versions of it, so the government gets the unenviable task of making the decision. So ultimately, there's only one commute. There's only one world. We're all here to stay. We're not going anywhere, and there's more coming. So we must work together to ensure resource development is done in a sustainable manner that respects the commute and enables our communities and families to be healthy and prosperous. I think that is it. Cook's Chow.
Wow, the intention and the silence and just the absorbing of the knowledge that you dropped is something that we're all grateful here. I'm glad that you were able to just share, and this is probably a tip of the iceberg, I'm guessing, part of your journey, and we really look forward to hopefully having you back. Like I was talking about earlier, I want to have you on the podcast, and I think we're all better off for this evening's speech. One more round of applause for David Walkem. So, on behalf of the BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference, we have a small token of appreciation for you. Token, that's funny, we were just talking about some of those things, but here we are perpetuating the tokenism. But here's the flag that I was wearing this morning. It's a smaller version, but please enjoy this, and thank you so much. Yep. All right. There's a few people that I want to embarrass, but I will wait till the Res Dog Walkers after dark discussion. It sounds like I was dared. Actually, I got one piece of housekeeping first. I usually am trying to be able to FaceTime with my kids and do some stuff, but I have this thing. Anyone seen the Ricola commercial? The Ricola. And so every once in a while, out of pure silence, I do that just to scare the shit out of my kids. And so I would love for everybody to, on the count of 3, just say Ricola as loud or as soft as you want, but I'll send, because I'm not going to make it home to see my kids tonight, so this is going to be a nice little good night gift for my kids, but there's a lot of people in here. 1, 2, 3. Ricola! That is so awesome. Thank you very much. There's a lot to soak in. There's been so many great things over the last 36 hours that we've all got to be a part of. We've got to witness. I think that's one of the things about collaboration is it takes witnessing. That's what Truth and Reconciliation about is witnessing. I think one of the most powerful political moments I've seen in the last few years was when Wab Kinew had the courage to step up and remind the Premier of Manitoba about what Truth and Reconciliation was. And he was in the middle of a speech. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but he walked onto the stage and said, I'm sorry, it was the Minister. It was the Minister of Indigenous Relations for Manitoba. And he walked onto that stage and said, I have to correct you. as a witness from the TRC who's heard the stories from all the elders of each of the communities, and he stood up and did that, and he is now the Premier of Manitoba. And so that's where it starts. Yes, round of applause for Walkem. So again, I want to thank the hosts, Nanaimuk, for always welcoming us into their territory. I want to thank our partners at C3 Alliance who have just made this stronger and bigger every year. I want to thank the staff and the CEO of C3 Alliance for really just digging in, and each year we've just found a way to make this better, and the speakers are just getting stronger and the crowds are getting bigger. But now we're going to have some fun. We're going to have as most a stereotypical res party that we can have over at the Coast Bastion, but only for an hour. But those of you who may have noticed, there's a lot of Res Dog Walker stuff around, and that's my podcast. We do that in partnership with the BC Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference. C3 Alliance has been a godsend in helping build the platform for us to do that. And we've been able to tell some great stories. So those of you who are into podcasts, Res Dog Walkers, it's on most of the platforms. But we just finished season 2 last week. And if the Premier's still talking to me, I'm going to ask him if his interview will be episode 1 of season 3. But what we're wanting to do with it now is just take it again to that next level. Those of you who've listened, it's very polite, it's very cordial, it's very engaging, it's endearing, and I've talked to a lot of my friends about some challenging issues. But this year we're going to start branching out and doing some more things. And tonight I'm going to mess around a little bit, and I might have a microphone in my hand. And those of you who aren't interested in being interviewed, I wouldn't make eye contact with me tonight. Those of you who might have something to say, whether it's ridiculous, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, make sure you make eye contact and we'll have a little chat tonight. But I'd like to invite everybody to the Coast Bastion Inn for a small reception of the first official Res Dog Walkers After Dark. Rumor has it that Chief Chris Roberts might belt out a tune or two for us tonight, as he's usually the leader of the karaoke committee. That usually, there's been a great progression over the years. People have gone to karaoke after this dinner. So this time we said, let's bring the karaoke to the people. But I don't think any of us rented a machine. So we're just going to go there and listen to some music, and someone will start singing. But that's what happens. But I'll tell you something. It's not just res parties that happen. When people hear music, they just sing. When Elder Lolly Good just said, play some instruments, everybody got up and played some instruments. Even the frowning people were smiling as that was happening today. So I just want to thank you all. This last day and a half has been tremendous for my heart. We still have some great stories to tell tomorrow. My friend Minister Ravi Parmar is going to be here. John Jack and I agreed we're going to rough him up a little bit and, indoctrinate him and maybe rookie him a little bit as the new guy on town. But please, everybody join us. We're having breakfast between 8 and 8:30 tomorrow. We're going to start at 8:30 sharp, even for me. Those of you who know me knows that means 8:32, but we'll cross that bridge in the morning. But again, just thank you for giving of yourselves. This has been such a wonderful day. I don't want to see it end, so let's all go and just enjoy each other as human beings and have some laughs. So thank you for a tremendous day, and I look forward to tomorrow. Gaelic Asa. Oh, and one more, just an update. Logan, I believe, is feeling better now. Logan, who was co-emceeing with me and is part of the C3 team, had a very severe allergic reaction and had to go to the hospital for some treatment. But I'm going to try to tell him to rub some dirt on it, man up a little bit, and come to the Res Dog party. So hopefully we'll see Logan there. And if he's all puffy, just poke it a little bit. All right. Have a great night, everybody.